Hey friends, it's Jake Thurston here with the Called Collective. Welcome to another episode where we exist to equip the next generation of leaders through blogs, through videos, through all sorts of other things. You want to be here. This is the place for you. I want to tell you about a time when I was completely overwhelmed by a goal that I just had absolutely no confidence in myself of accomplishing. Okay, several years ago, me and some friends decided that we were going to do something called a Tough Mudder obstacle course. Okay, so the Tough Mudder obstacle courses are 10 miles long and feature about 25 different obstacles over the course of these. You know, you're getting down in the mud, you're running between all of these different obstacles, you're climbing over stuff, and it requires a lot of upper body strength, which I don't have. And here's the thing: the one we signed up for was the Tough Mudder half. In other words, we did only 12 obstacles over 5 miles, and I still thought that was just way too much for me to even possibly accomplish. I was not a physical guy. I was not athletic by any means. The closest thing I ever did that would even be closely considered athletic was marching in the drum line in high school, and that's even debatable if you would consider that a sport or not. I think it is, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. But when I looked at this thing that I had never done before, I was overwhelmed. I quickly thought, I'm not strong enough. I don't have the stamina. I can't do this. It was a goal that was so far beyond me that I just doubted every part of my ability to do the thing that was set out before me. Because when we're faced with an overwhelming goal, it's really easy to feel unqualified. Maybe you felt that way when it came to a project or a sport that you were trying out for, or maybe a really tough conversation that you had to open up about, or maybe when you felt called to ministry. And if that's you, you're certainly not alone, because even the prophet Isaiah had a really similar experience. So let's look at his story. We're diving into his calling profile about how Isaiah the prophet got called to his ministry. And we start in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Here's what it says. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And at the sound of their voices, the doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. That's a pretty psychedelic image if you're thinking about this. So just put yourself in Isaiah's shoes here, okay? He's transformed and thrust into this crazy, very real vision. He's in the temple of the Lord, and what he sees are these 2 seraphim, which are creatures that are really based out of the Hebrew word seraphim, which means flames. So this is suggesting that these are fiery, angelic beings from the heavens. They are not of this world. And the fact that they had 6 wings is something in Hebrew tradition that pointed to the fact that these seraphim had remarkable powers. So they weren't just on fire, they weren't just angels, they were powerful. This would have been crazy. You probably would have been pooping your pants if you saw this. But here's what they do. Despite them being on fire, despite them being remarkably powerful, here's what they do with their 2 wings, okay? 2 wings cover their faces, 2 wings cover their feet, and then they use the other 2 to fly around. Why would these powerful beings cover their face and cover their feet, and using only 2 of them to fly around? What's going on there with this image? Well, according to the tradition of the seraphim and in this passage, this was a sign of them humbling themselves before God's own holiness. These creatures that were flying around calling out to each other saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And as they're proclaiming their God's holiness, the doorposts and the thresholds of the temple shook and the whole place is filled with smoke. This is truly a sight to behold. And this points to the first key thing that we need to get out of Isaiah's calling profile. It's that God is overwhelming. God is overwhelming. He's not just this really nice idea or a nice God who loves us, I think that's something that we talk a lot about in the church. in other sermons is that God is kind, he is good, he is loving, and he certainly is that, but he is also incredibly overwhelming. His holiness is something that we cannot match. The word holy literally means complete, mature, set apart, other than. He is completely distinct from everything we are about this world. There is not even an ounce, a dash, a pinch of sin that is in his soul, that is in his life. And that even just proves this other further point, that he is completely worth humbling ourselves before him. If the angels of heaven humble themselves before him, then surely we ought to as well. And it points to just how perfect his judgment is, that he knows what he's doing. He cannot be denied. He cannot be ignored. He cannot be overpowered. When we truly allow ourselves to grasp that, then it's important that we get to the second point, because this is an adequate response to the overwhelming holiness of God. Okay, and here's point number 2, is that feeling not enough is normal. Feeling not enough is normal. Check out Isaiah's response to this vision, because I think you would have a very similar response. I know I would. Here's what he says. "Woe to me," I cried. "I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." In other words, Isaiah is completely wrecked here. He's practically saying, who am I to be the one witnessing the God Almighty in this pure fashion? I can't handle it. I am unworthy. I am not good enough. The people I belong to aren't good enough. I am drenched in sin. I'm going to die, essentially. Isaiah's exposure to God's perfection and holiness magnified his own imperfection and his sinfulness, making him feeling completely unworthy in comparison. Because again, when we compare ourselves to God, it becomes blatantly obvious how far we fall short. That's when the not enough start rolling in. I'm not good enough. I'm not holy enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not old enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not trained enough. I'm not fluent enough. I'm not popular enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not pure enough. I'm not qualified enough. That is a very natural response to one, an overwhelming God that completely surpasses our comprehension. And 2, when he presents a goal before us that just seems entirely daunting, such as, I want you to go into ministry. I want you to be a leader in my mission. But here's the thing. Here's the last important point that we need to get out of Isaiah's story, okay? Number 3, God cleans us up to send us out. God cleans us up to send us out. Because here's what happens next to Isaiah. Verse 6. "Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. And with it he touched my mouth and said, 'See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for.' And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here I am. Send me.'" And there's a lot that had to happen before Isaiah felt confident enough to say, "Here I am, send me. I volunteer for the mission that you have, God." Because again, Isaiah is completely overwhelmed. He feels like he's sinful, that he is not good enough to be in the presence of God, let alone to respond to his mission, right? So what happens is these angelic, pure, holy beings come and they take a coal from the altar. And the altar is significant because the altar was where sacrifices were made to God as a means of atoning for their sin, okay? We still have altar calls. When we feel really guilty during sermons, right after the word of God is preached, we go to altars to confess our sin, to be atoned with God, right? So the altar is a significant place, but then they also take this burning hot coal, which represents the act of purification, okay? And by putting it to Isaiah's lips, which for one would be really stinking hot, that would hurt a lot. But thankfully this is a vision, so I don't know if Isaiah just had his sensories, all of his senses deprivated or something. I don't know how it works. It's crazy how God does stuff like this, right? But what this shows is that this was a means of purifying Isaiah. That despite his sin, despite where he came from, and despite feeling unqualified, God cleaned him up. God cleaned him up. He met him right there in a crazy moment of saying, I still choose you. And by the time that Isaiah had this really amazing experience with the Lord and with these angelic beings and he felt clean, that was when he could respond with, I'm ready to go. Send me to your people. And it was from then on that Isaiah became one of the most popular prophets in the entire history of God's people. So what does this all mean for us, right? Again, God is completely overwhelming. He is so big, it doesn't even make sense that he would have his people, humans, go out and do his mission for him, right? And therefore, it's very easy for us to feel like we're not enough in those instances, but God is perfect in being able to clean us up and purify us so that we can go and do this. And he has done that for us in the work of Jesus Christ in his Son. So if you feel like you're not good enough for this, you're not alone. But two, it's no longer an excuse. There has to come a point where you say, Lord, you're working in me, your Spirit is within me, cleanse me, send me. Because after we're cleaned up, we're able to be sent, but then we have to respond in obedience. That's what Isaiah did. Perhaps that's what you need to do as well. How do you need to respond? How do you need to be cleaned up so that you can be sent out? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Called Collective. If you like this stuff, make sure you subscribe. Give us a thumbs up on the video below if you want more of this content. We would love that. And of course, check us out on our website, www.thecalledcollective.org. We got all sorts of other resources and services there that you don't want to miss out. And even a newsletter where we can get all this stuff shipped straight to your inbox every Mondays when that goes out. So be sure to do that. We love you guys. We'll see you in the next one. Deuces.